You know, every time you step into your kitchen, you're actually stepping onto an invisible battlefield. It's this whole world teeming with microscopic life, microorganisms that are literally everywhere, on our hands, in our water, and in our food. Now, most of them are totally harmless, and some are even helpful, but others, well, others are waging a silent war that can make us really sick. So let's pull back the curtain on this invisible world and figure out how to win the fight for a safe kitchen.
See, on one side, you've got our allies. These are the good guys, the microorganisms we actually rely on to create some amazing foods, like tangy yogurt or a really good sharp cheese. They're a huge part of our culinary world. But then, on the other side, you've got the invaders, pathogens. These are the harmful microbes that cause foodborne illness. And the tricky part is, they often look, smell, and taste like absolutely nothing at all.
And that's the big question, right? How do we do it? This is all about understanding the enemy, learning their playbook, and then using that intelligence to keep our food, and of course ourselves, safe. To win this battle, you've got to know your enemy. And there are four main types of these microbial villains that we really need to watch out for in the kitchen. So let's meet the main players. First on the list, viruses. The best way to think of these guys is as tiny, tiny hijackers. They can't reproduce by themselves, so what they do is invade our own living cells and use our body's machinery to make more copies of themselves. What's kind of wild about viruses is they aren't technically alive, and they don't grow in food. The food is just a vehicle, like a rideshare, to get into your body. And while they are incredibly contagious and can hit you fast and hard, the good news is the illness is usually over in a day or two. And the most common way they spread? Unwashed hands and contaminated seafood. Okay, next up, parasites. Just like the name sounds, these are organisms that live on or inside a host, feeding off of it. They can be anything from microscopic single-celled creatures all the way up to larger worms that you can actually see. So just like viruses, parasites don't actually multiply in the food itself. They need a host to reproduce. If they do make you sick, the symptoms tend to hang around a lot longer than a typical bacterial bug. But here's the good news. Our best defense is super simple. Just cook your food to the proper temperature. That one step is really the key to controlling parasites. Our third type of pathogen is fungi, and this category includes both molds and yeasts. Now, yeasts are usually just responsible for spoiling food. You know, that funky smell in old juice. But molds can be a much, much bigger problem. Okay, here's why mold is so dangerous. Some types produce these poisons called mycotoxins. And these toxins aren't just sitting on the surface. They grow down deep into the food, like roots. So no, you can't just scrape the fuzzy bit off your jam or bread and call it good. And what's worse, they can actually grow in the cold temperatures of your fridge. And that brings us to the number one culprit, the most common cause of food poisoning out there, bacteria. These little single-celled organisms are absolutely everywhere. And when the harmful ones get into our food with the right conditions, they can multiply fast. Since bacteria are really the masterminds of foodborne illness, they definitely deserve a closer look. You see, they have two totally different ways of making us sick, and knowing the difference is super important, so let's break it down. So, bacteria have two main strategies. First, there's a bacterial infection. This is when you eat live bacteria, like Salmonella in undercooked chicken. They get into your gut and start multiplying, so the symptoms come on pretty slowly. But the second strategy is bacterial intoxication. This is caused by eating the toxins, basically the waste products, that bacteria have already left behind in the food. And this one hits you fast, often with vomiting in just a few hours. And you can really see the difference in the symptoms here. An infection is more likely to cause things like diarrhea, as those bacteria set up shop in your intestines. But an intoxication, well, that often triggers a much more immediate, violent reaction like vomiting, because your body is trying to get that poison out as fast as possible. But wait, bacteria have a secret weapon. When things get tough, maybe it's too hot or too dry, some of them can form this protective shell and go into a dormant state. It's called a spore. Think of it like a tiny seed or a defensive bunker. And these spores are incredibly tough. I mean, they can survive normal cooking temperatures, they can survive sanitizers. And then once conditions get good again, let's say you leave a pot of chili to cool on the stove for too long, they wake up and start multiplying like crazy. This is exactly why properly cooling your leftovers is just as critical as cooking them in the first place. So, the big question is, how do we stop these bacteria from waking up and multiplying? Well, we need to understand what makes them tick. We need to crack their code. And the secret is a simple acronym, FAT Tom. No, it's not a person. It's the villain's playbook. It stands for the 6 conditions that these pathogenic bacteria need to grow. The beautiful thing is, if we can control just one of these conditions, we can stop them right in their tracks. So let's break it down real quick. F is for food, especially high-protein stuff. A is for acidity. They don't like acidic environments. The 2 T's stand for temperature and time. O is for oxygen, although some can grow without it. And M is for moisture. Now, of all these, the 2 that we have the most control over in our own kitchens are time and temperature. And that brings us to probably the most important concept in all of food safety, the temperature danger zone. Between 4 and 60 degrees Celsius, that's 40 to 140 Fahrenheit, bacteria can multiply at an absolutely shocking rate. So your one job is to keep hot foods hot and cold foods cold. Keep them out of this zone. Which leads us to the single most important rule you need to burn into your memory, the 2-hour rule. Any potentially hazardous food that's been left in that temperature danger zone for a grand total of 2 hours has to be thrown out, period. And that time adds up. It doesn't reset if you pop it back in the fridge for a bit. 2 hours, and it's done. All right, so while those microbes are the main soldiers on this invisible battlefield, they're not the only threat. To really get the full picture, we've got to be aware of a few other types of contamination too. They basically fall into 3 other categories. You've got chemical contamination, which could come from cleaning products stored too close to food. Then there's physical contamination. That's when foreign objects like a piece of glass or a bandage fall into the food. And finally, you have allergens. Now, they aren't contaminants in the same way, but for some people, they can cause a really severe, even life-threatening immune reaction. Look, understanding all these threats isn't about being paranoid. It's about being empowered. You are the one in control of your kitchen environment. And this is especially important when you're cooking for people who are more vulnerable to getting sick. You see, while anybody can get a foodborne illness, some groups are at a much higher risk of it becoming something really serious or even fatal. We're talking about the elderly, very young children, pregnant women, and anyone with a weakened immune system. For them, what might be a minor inconvenience for you could be a major health crisis. So, the next time you're in the kitchen, just remember that invisible battlefield. Remember that your food is teeming with life, and you are its gatekeeper. By understanding the enemy and controlling the conditions, you can make sure every single meal is not just delicious, but safe. The power is truly in your hands.